With
Wait, stop. This way, yeah. Don't fall down, don't fall down, don't fall down. Slowly.
Can now confirm that as of about 1 hour ago, the security operation at Dusit complex is over.
Dusit Hotel. If you are familiar with this is that courtyard coming in, and you can see the parking slot where you collect your tickets, and these appear to be 3 individuals accessing the premises, and there's another one coming through. So like we said, we didn't know this until now. The CCTV footage showing at least 4 attackers entering the premises, and as you can see the timestamp, that's at
It was a normal Tuesday afternoon in Nairobi, January 15th, 2019. The kind of day where the city buzzed with corporate energy and soft traffic hums under a baking sun. The streets of Westlands, Nairobi upscale commercial hub, pulsed with movement. Towering glass buildings reflected golden rays over manicured pavements, and in the leafy silence of 14 Riverside Drive, executive, entrepreneurs, techies and diplomats began returning from lunch to resume business as usual. At the heart of that address stood the DusitD2 complex, a luxurious hotel and office park, sleek and secure, housing not only guests but businesses like international consulting firms, banks, and few foreign missions. It was a sanctuary of Nairobi's modern urban elite. But as the clock ticked to 3:28 p.m., a sound split the air, one that would echo in the memory of the nation. A loud explosion, then gunfire. Eyewitnesses first reported hearing a blast in the parking lot. A suicide car bomb had just been detonated at the entrance of the complex, immediately igniting flames and smoke. As chaos erupted, a suicide bomber later identified as Mahir Khalid Riziki blew himself up just outside the Secret Garden restaurant, scattering bodies and shrapnel across the outdoor seating area, and explosions was meant to sow panic, and it worked. In the seconds that followed, 4 armed militants dressed in black tactical gear and armed with AK-47 rifles and grenades stormed into the hotel and office compound, calmly calculated with a mission to kill.
Wawili wakaingia kwa ile mlango, ila walikuwa maoria.
Na walikuwa wamevaa kivipi?
Walikuwa na jacket black. Jacket nyeusi. Tuliona mpaka hapa ndio kuna gari ilikuwa hapo imetuzuia. Sasa tukaona mpaka kila pale.
On the afternoon of Tuesday, January 15, 2019, a meticulous planned attack began to unfold at 14 Riverside Drive in Nairobi, a tree-lined high-security enclave housing the luxurious DusitD2 hotel, business offices, cafe, and banks. Everything seemed normal until 3:28 p.m. when the first explosion shattered the calm. The first sign of danger came quietly. A silver grey car packed with explosive rounded up to the gate of the complex. Inside, a suicide bomber named Mahir Khalid Riziki, a known Kenyan radical who had disappeared to Somali years earlier, waited for the signal. Then, without warning, boom, he detonated the device, killing himself instantly and igniting chaos at the entrance. Flames shot into the air, windows rattled across the city, smoke mushroomed into the afternoon sky. But that was just the opening act. Seconds later, 4 heavily armed militants dressed in black and carrying AK-47 rifles, grenades, and extra magazines leaped from a second vehicle and stormed into the DusitD2 complex. Calm, composed, trained. They didn't speak, they shot. Bullets began flying. The first victims were security guards and people in the lobby. Eyewitnesses said the gunmen moved slowly, shooting at point-blank range, seemingly enjoying the fear they were spreading. Inside the Secret Garden cafe, people dropped their drinks and dove under tables. In nearby offices, some hosting multinational companies like Cellulant and Adam Smith International, employees scrambled to lock themselves in meeting rooms, under desks, in closets. Some fled out the window. Others, paralyzed by fear, texted loved ones goodbye. Outside, the sound of sustained gunfire rang through Westlands. Cell phones footage started circulating on WhatsApp and Twitter. Thick smoke, people crawling under parked cars, others jumping from the first floor to escape the lobby. It was clear this was no robbery, it was a full-scale terror attack. The Kenya Recce Squad and anti-terror police unit arrived quickly. Armed officers stormed the scene in waves, coordinating with military special forces. But the attackers had split up, and they had rigged parts of the building with explosives. Some gunmen shot from elevated floors, pinning down first responders. Others roamed hallways, dragging out those they found hiding and executing them. For over 12 hours, gunfires, grenade blasts, and screams filled the complex. Hostages were texting family members from bathroom floors. A few survivors hid in ceiling panels. One man reportedly stayed curled in a cabinet for almost 15 hours without moving. At around 9:30 p.m., Kenya's Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i announced that the situation was under control. But the shooting hadn't stopped. The operation continued through the night. Every floor, every room, every hallway had to be cleared one by one as rescuers moved cautiously to avoid tripwires or grenades. By morning of January 16th, President Uhuru Kenyatta addressed the nation. His voice somber, he confirmed, all the terrorists have been eliminated. The siege has lasted nearly 20 hours. The final death toll, 21 innocent Kenyans, with dozens more injured. Over 700 people were rescued from the complex, thanks to the bravery of Kenya's elite.
Can now confirm that as of about 1 hour ago, the security operation at Dusit complex is over and all the terrorists eliminated.
The attack was later claimed by al-Shabaab, who cited it as retaliation for Kenya's military presence in Somalia. But it was also part of a chilling shift in their strategy, recruiting local Kenyan-born fighters using mobile money and targeting symbols of modern urban Kenya. The DusitD2 attack wasn't just about body count, it was psychological warfare aimed at the heart of Kenya's capital, and it worked for a while. But it also ignited unity, resilience, and a renewed commitment to never again let terror write the city's story. When the final gunshot faded and the smoke lifted from the corridors of the DusitD2 hotel in the morning of January 16, 2019, Kenya stood in mourning. The tragedy had pierced not just the heart of Nairobi's financial district, but the heart of families around the world. By official count, the DusitD2 complex attack claimed the lives of 21 people. A 22nd victim, a survivor who had been critically wounded, succumbed to injuries later in 2020, bringing the true death toll to 22. These were not just numbers, they were people in the prime of their lives, mothers, sons, friends, and colleagues. Some had stopped for lunch, others were attending business meetings or catching up with friends. Their stories reflect both the cruelty of the attack and the fragility of ordinary moments we often take for granted. Non-victims. Jason Splinder, U.S. citizen, an American entrepreneur and survivor of the 9/11 World Trade Center attack, Jason had moved to Kenya to invest in social impact business. At 40 years old, he was a co-founder of IDEV International, with offices inside the DusitD2 complex. Jason was eating lunch when he was gunned down. The irony. He had survived one terrorist attack in New York only to lose his life to another in Nairobi. Luke Potter, British South African dual national. Luke was the African program director for Adam Smith International. a respected British development consultancy. He had spent years working across war zones and fragile states in Africa, helping communities rebuild. His death was confirmed by his colleagues, who described him as a kind, brilliant, and deeply committed to his work. Fatuma Ibrahim, a secretary at the offices in the building. Fatuma was known by colleagues as soft-spoken and reliable. She was amongst those gunned down in the early stages of the assault while attempting to flee the lobby. Her family in Hisili waited desperately for hours before receiving the devastating news. Monica Wanjiru, an intern at Cellulance. Just 23, Monica had recently started an internship at Cellulance, a fintech company housed within the DusitD2 complex. Her dreams of launching a tech career were shortcut when the attackers stormed the building. Several of her colleagues also lost their lives that day. In the addition of lost lives, over 30 people were injured, many critically. Some were hit by stray bullets, others were hurt jumping from windows or crawling over broken glass in desperate bids to escape. Among the wounded were a pregnant woman shot in the leg while escaping through the car park, a foreign banker who survived after being shot twice in the shoulder and abdomen, a Kenyan security guard injured while shielding others during the initial blast. Many survivors reported psychological trauma, with some undergoing therapy for PTSD. For them, the echoes of gunfires and the smell of burning flesh haunt their nights. A few have never returned to work in the city since.
What? Don't run, slowly. Wait, go. It's okay now.
Nimekuja spa na madada.
The 22 victims represented 6 different nationalities, reminding the world that terrorism knows no borders. 19 Kenyans, 1 American, 1 British South African, 1 previously unconfirmed African national. Many of these kills were young professionals, tech workers, NGO staff, and hospitality employees. Some were the sole breadwinners for their families. Their deaths were felt not only in the Nairobi but in homesteads stretching across Kenya, from Kakamega to Kisumu, from Mombasa to Meru. Funerals were held across the country in the days that followed. Wails of mourning echoed through villages as bodies arrived home. There were no state burials, but the grief was national. A memorial plaque now stands at 14 Riverside Drive, bearing the names of those lost. Every January 15th, flowers are laid, candles lit, and moments of silence observed, not just to remember the lives stolen, but to remind Kenya of what it survived. The Somali-based terrorist group al-Shabaab, a well-known affiliate of al-Qaeda, claimed responsibility for the attack just hours after it began. In a statement broadcast through a propaganda wing, Al-Kataib al-Qaeda said the assault in DusitD2 was part of their larger war against foreign influence in Horn of Africa. They called the operation "Jerusalem Will Never Be Judaized," a direct reference to US President Donald Trump's 2017 decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which had triggered global outrage in Islamic extremist cycle. Al-Shabaab declared that the attack was meant as a message to the Zionist Crusader Alliance, targeting Kenya not only because of its alliance with the West, but especially due to its military presence in Somalia under the African Union Mission, AMISOM. But beneath the propaganda was a carefully calculated local operation, executed almost entirely by Kenyan nationals, a chilling evolution in Al-Shabaab tactics. The attackers weren't faceless foreigners. They were young Kenyan-born men, radicalized and trained across the border in Somalia. The face of the operation was a man most Kenyans had never heard of until that day. Ali Salim Gishunge, aka Farouk or Eric Kinyanjui Muni, the lead attacker and local coordinator, a 25-year-old Kenyan raised in Isiolo and Mombasa, known for his quiet demeanor and religious devotion. He had been radicalized online and traveled to Somalia, where he received weapons training and was groomed for martyrdom. CCTV footage later revealed Gishunge calmly entering DusitD2, rifle in hand, leading the assault team like a commander on a battlefield. He was killed by security forces during the siege. Mahir Khalid Riziki, the suicide bomber, the first to die in the attack. Mahir detonated himself just outside the Secret Garden restaurant moments after the car bomb went off. He had vanished from Mombasa in 2015 and joined al-Shabaab in Somalia. His re-entry into Kenya, unnoticed by authorities, exposed a major security loophole. DNA later confirmed his identity from body parts found at the scene. Kaspal Obiero and Michael Oyoma, alleged facilitators. Though not physically at the scene, these two men, later arrested, were accused of assisting with logistics, identification documents and financial transfers. They were formally charged and later convicted in Kenya court for aiding the attackers.
Uko wapi? Tuniambie uko wapi? Wapi? Change of taarifa. Kileleshwa kuja basi mpaka hapa hivi. Kwa flyover hapa Dusit.
The DusitD2 attack wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a well-coordinated, well-financed urban terror operation. Investigators found that the operation cost around $45,000 to $50,000. Money was channeled through Kenyan mobile money platforms like M-Pesa, then withdrawn in small amounts to avoid suspicion. Funds were tracked back to operative in Mandera, a Kenyan-Somali border town, long known as radicalization hotspots. Fake IDs and safe houses. The attackers lived quietly in Ruaraka and Muchatha, Nairobi suburbs. They used forged Kenyan national IDs obtained through corrupt networks. Surveillance later showed them rehearsing in scheduled areas, possibly even doing dry runs of the Dusit complex layouts. Social media and radicalization. Al-Shabaab recruiters targeted Kenyan youth via encrypted apps and Telegram channels. Many of the recruits were educated, tech-savvy, and from coastal or northeastern Kenya, where economic hardship and feelings of marginalization made radical ideologies more appealing. After the attack, dozens of suspects were rounded up across Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mandera. Gishunge's wife, a university student believed to have helped coordinate logistics, fled to Somalia days before the attack. She remains at large. Kenyan intelligence acknowledged that the attack exposed deep failures in surveillance and inter-agency cooperation.
One was left outside and they walked into this particular place to orchestrate the attack. We're told that what we know right now, having spoken to the Director of Criminal Investigation, is that he says that they have run the plates and it is no longer a mystery.
As smoke still curled from the DusitD2 ruins and broken glass glistered under the January sun, Kenya security operators moved swiftly into phase 2. Find the hands behind the guns. The Anti-Terror Police Unit and the National Intelligence Service (NIS) and Directorate of Criminal Investigation began what would become one of the most complex counter-terror operations Kenya had ever mounted. The attackers had all been killed, but the masterminds, the financiers, logistic handlers, safe house providers remained hidden. Within 48 hours, police had arrested several suspects in Isili, Muchatha, and Ruaraka, Nairobi suburbs that al-Shabaab recruiters had quietly infiltrated. Mobile phones recovered from the attackers were gold mines, encrypted telegram messages, Somali phone numbers, bank transfers, fake IDs registration, and photos of rehearsals, some of them taken near the DusitD2 complex itself. Among the first major arrests were Michael Oyoma and Kaspal Obiero, Ali Salim Gishunge's wife, a Somali national who also picked up in Mandera, accused of laundering funds through mobile money platforms like M-Pesa, keeping transactions under 100,000 Kenyan shillings to avoid detection. As the trials dragged into 2020 and beyond, the court took their time. National interest was high, but so were the security concerns. Evidence included CCTV footage, bank records, survivors' testimonies, and data forensics. The prosecution called over 30 witnesses. Finally, in May 2025, nearly 6 years later, the courts have found two main suspects, Michael Oyoma and Mohammed Abdi Ali, guilty of aiding and abetting terrorism. They were convicted under Kenya's Prevention of Terrorism Acts. In June 2025, they were sentenced to 30 years in prison each, a rare but powerful moment of judicial accountability in Kenya's fight against extremists.
Na watu wasipige risasi hivi hivi. Ndio tujue mahali nalia. Mahali wako.
Hapa just after the answer. So these guys stop over here.
Thomas.
After Dusit, the government accelerated the integration of CCTV surveillance, biometric ID verification, and real-time emergency coordinated between the police and private security. Nairobi hotels, malls, and offices adopted stricter access protocol, ID scans, vehicle checks, sniffer dogs. Private security companies were forced to train their guards in active shooter scenario, a concept that barely existed in Kenya pre-Westgate era. The attack exposed how mobile money and convenience for millions had become a funding channel for terror cells. New regulations were introduced to flag suspicion pattern and enforce identity verification for SIM card registration. Banks and fintech companies had to tighten Know Your Customer protocol, and M-Pesa transaction began triggering alerts for unusual activity. For the first time, Kenya faced the reality that its own youth were becoming weapons. Most of the attackers were not Somalis. They were Kenyan-born, radicalized through online propaganda, alienated, and promises of purpose. This led to expanded de-radicalization program, community outreach efforts in Isiolo, Mombasa, Isili, and closer scrutiny of mosques suspected of harboring recruiters. Every year on January 15th, the names of the dead are read out at 14 Riverside Drive. Survivors lay white roses and light candles near a memorial plaque, many of them still bearing the physical and emotional scars of that day. NGOs and survivors groups like Dusit Survivor Network continue to provide trauma counseling, raise awareness on PTSD, and advocate for victim compensation. The legacy of DusitD2 is not just about loss, it's about survival, about the nameless receptionist who hid 12 people in a staff closet. It's about the GSU sniper who took out a militant from 200 meters away, about the survivors who now train others on how to stay alive in an ambush.